Welcome to the Indiana Basketball Weekly Show on the Really True Sports Network. I am your host for the Indiana Basketball Weekly Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, the always positive, Kent Sterling. How you doing, Kent?
I'm positive as hell today, Mike. I can't wait to see what they do against Penn State. It's a new day. The Hoosiers are headed to the tournament. All things are perfect, and we couldn't be more pleased with the way they played last night.
Yeah, there's no doubt after last night this team's headed to the Final Four, Kent.
Archie Miller's a genius. I'm telling you, anybody who thought, let's get rid of Archie 24 hours ago, they were out of their minds. We know that now.
Sure we do. Now, Sunday, we may have a different thought, but last night, Trace Jackson Davis, 27 points. He played his ass off. He was the difference in this game. If Trace Jackson Davis plays like this every game, and my only concern was not feeding him the ball enough, especially in the last 5 minutes, but Trace Jackson Davis has a chance to be a special player at IU.
Well, he does. And it's kind of, there are some complicated aspects to basketball for sure. But basketball, as we know it, is really kind of a simple game. And offensively, what you want to do is get the ball into the hands of the most talented offensive player that you have as often as you can do it. And so Indiana fans, especially after the game at Michigan, we're kind of scratching our heads saying, boy, oh boy, Trace Jackson Davis, he had 3 rebounds. I think he took 2 shots. What in the sweet hell are you doing? What kind of offensive schematics are you employing where your best player only gets the ball that often? It seems like Archie, the message from Archie to the team was received, understood, processed, and then enacted. Trace Jackson Davis got the ball a lot, scored 27 points, grabbed 16 rebounds. Let's go.
Yeah, and Devontae Green. I'm not going to rip him here at the start. I'll just rip him at the end with that one pass he threw. But I think he only shot 3 out of 9. He scored 11 points. Didn't seem like much, but down 23-13, he hits a 3. They start to make a little bit of run to get back in the game, and the game's pretty much over from then. So Devontae played a positive role in the first half.
There are 2 kinds of basketball fans to me and 2 kinds of Indiana fans, and you see them both on Twitter. The kind that watch Devontae Green and see him for all the good stuff he does, and then the people who see him for all the bad things that he does. I think that I'm more the latter than the former. When I see him make a bad pass and throw away a possession, these other people, the positive lights among us, they say, look, the guy's making 3-point shots, and he's more good than bad, isn't he? And we say, well, look, no, because he's throwing a bad lob pass, and he's sacrificing a possession for no reason other than it seemed like it was fun at the time. And that's not the way basketball is played to me. So, I get it, and he moved a little bit defensively, and he did a relatively good job on that end of the floor. He knocked down some shots, but he took some bad shots. He made that bad pass. And if you're a team like Indiana, who's not in the aggregate more talented than anybody else in the Big Ten, save maybe Northwestern, you know what? You have got to execute with precision, possession after possession, or you're going to get your ass beat.
Well, my only question is, after the game, Miller said offensively our main goal was to get Trace going early. Yeah. And he said he's so important to the team, and he responded with a great performance. My question is, why is this not always the first thing you want to do?
Yeah, it would seem to be pretty simple. When you turn, like I said, when you turn basketball into calculus, you can get lost in the weeds. If you make it basic math, and you can succeed without kind of giving yourself a headache. And getting the ball to Trace Jackson Davis as often as possible, starting with the beginning of Big Ten play. I'm not sure why you didn't do it. Now, I'll grant you this, though. Minnesota's defense was awful. They were terrible on the defensive end last night. How many easy buckets did Indiana get at Michigan? And don't rack your brain. The answer is 0. Against Michigan, Al Durham's getting to the rack. Finney's getting to the rack. Devontae Green did get to the rack, but he missed. They did not take away any of the stuff that Indiana wanted to get done, and that's going to be the problem on Sunday because Penn State is smart about that stuff, and they defend in a way that Indiana does not appreciate.
Well, I would think the key here is this. What we've seen in the past with Durham Finney, they have a tendency to try to force the tempo. Where last night, I think they kind of let the game come from them, and they played under control. They played with composure while still looking to post the tempo, but they did it within the abilities that they possess.
Yeah, they did. They played within themselves, and that's something in basketball too. And that's something we're talking about in Indiana right now with the NBA Pacers. We're talking about Victor Oladipo, a proud graduate of Indiana University. And, when Vic plays within himself and doesn't try to be, Magic Vic, the Pacers have a really good chance to win. When he goes outside of himself and tries to lift the team through his majesty, you know what? It's not a very good basketball team. Basketball's funny that way. You play within yourself. You do those things at which you are really good, and you negate those things at which you're not really good. And you have a chance, if you got 5 guys who are committed to that, you got a chance to win a hell of a lot of basketball games.
Yeah, and I think defensively, we saw a couple things. I think one adjustment was how Indiana defended the high ball screens. Early in the contest, Minnesota slipped their big men to the basket before Indiana could recover after hedging on those screens, which creates a lot of 2-on-1 opportunities after the Gophers guards would race past that hedge. And I think what we saw was Miller kind of dialed back how far out they were covering those actions. And another difference we saw, I think, was the ability for IU's guards to stay in front of the ball.
And that brings up a good point. And kind of to your earlier point, why didn't we see this kind of in-game adjustment earlier in the season? Where you're right, the hard hedge was almost entirely gone for the last 3 quarters of that game, and Joey Brunk played 8 minutes because Joey was a really bad matchup on the defensive end for what Minnesota was trying to get done. And so his minutes were reduced markedly. And the Hoosiers, as a result, were a much better team. There are going to be days when Joey's a really good matchup, and there are going to be days when he's not. But it seemed like Archie was just kind of committed to this rotation and really wasn't paying real close attention to what was going on and adjusting on the fly. Last night, he looked like a competent in-game coach, and that's really the first time that we've seen that maybe this season.
All right, we have a listener question from Twitter, which you can go to @GrillingTruth to send a direct message. I'll ask the question again. And this is kind of a funny question, as you can tell by my funny voice that I'm using to ask it. But
yeah,
we have @HoosierDaddy. That's original. The whole needs to follow TGD's lead and get a badass buzzed haircut. He says, I remember one NCAA tournament when a good mid-major team, maybe it was VCU, had their hair buzzed as a SOA unity, and then they played together. As a former Marine Corps, I don't know, I can't even read that word. I know that shaggy hippies usually do not play hard and as a unit.
Well, okay. I'll tell you what, though. I mean, that's really changed.
I obviously didn't read all that question before I asked it, by the way, but go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know other people play better because they get haircuts or not. I remember the Pacers doing that in the 90s, in the mid-90s. They all shaved their heads.
Yeah.
And that was pretty cool. But you know what? Joey Brunk's got such a beautiful head of hair. I think it'd be a shame for him to take the shears to that. Justin Smith, I know he's proud of his hair. I know Devontae Green for a couple of years, he was sort of rocking that tight in the front, sort of, bulgy afro in the back. That was sort of an interesting look. It seems like a lot of the guys have kind of dialed it back just a little bit. It was getting like Trace, he was starting to get floppy. It was starting to bounce all over the place. And I don't know what caused him to get that haircut. But you know what? He did not play well against Michigan with that haircut. He did play great last night against Minnesota. So I think we're 500.
All right. Another question from at Richard Johnson, 22. He says, Race Thompson was a revelation for me last night.
Yeah.
I thought Hunter was the key to opening the team's full potential, but Race showed last night he has the skill set to be a game changer for this group. More minutes in a starting role are in order. What are your guys' opinions?
I don't know where he starts. You know what I mean? I mean, if you start him at the 4, then Tracy's the 5. I don't want to get all lost in the positions because we're kind of in an era of almost positionless basketball. I think his energy was great coming off the bench last night. I don't think that you need to upset the apple cart by changing the starting lineup. Him playing 25 minutes last night, to me, was perfect. He played his ass off, 9 points, 10 rebounds. I thought he was terrific. Jerome Hunter's another guy certainly capable of doing that. But I really thought, and what I say, what is it? Trace and race and pray for grace. How about that?
Well, I would say this. I think people read too much into who's starting and who's not starting.
Yeah.
Kevin McHale was a sixth man for a lot of his career, and he's still in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and that's true. And, you know, I think on February 20th, kind of the die's already cast. I like the way it worked last night. You know, we've seen Archie kind of dick around a little bit with the starting lineup where Devontae was coming off the bench doing well, so they started him, and that didn't work out so well, so they put him back on the bench. And I don't think you need to confuse the issue for everybody by having Race Thompson. I think that there are matchups where it's going to be good, and I would not I wouldn't completely dispute the notion that Race played really well last night because his parents were right there down close to the court because they're from Minnesota.
Yeah, and that was 15 minutes from where he played high school basketball. So I'm sure
Right.
It had something to do with it. He was inspired like Devontae was like a week ago.
But, man, if you can get a guy like that to play, if he can play like that on Sunday against Penn State, that is – last night I thought it was pretty much 50-50 going and getting loose balls. There was a period of time where offensive rebounds really kind of just bounced to Minnesota. But I thought Race playing really, really hard, making people down low uncomfortable, getting after the ball all over the place. I thought he changed the tenor of that game.
Well, how about this? Could you start Race Thompson over Joey Brunk?
Well, yeah, but then then what kind of a – I guess it depends on the matchups.
Because
right?
I don't see, and I hate to be mean, but I don't really see a need for Joey Brunk right now.
Well, again, it depends on the match. Last night, certainly, you know, the matchups were not good for Joey Brunk. You needed somebody more athletic and who's going to be able to be an offensive threat on some level, and Joey just wasn't. So I think based on the matchups, you keep rolling with what you got. And you adjust through the game, and I thought Archie did that at a really high level last night. I think beating Minnesota by 12 is a really good quality result, despite the fact that Minnesota's lost 5 of 6 now, and that they are in complete chaos, and that Richard Pitino can't coach his way out of a paper bag.
And that's the great thing, because he's going to get fired. And I don't like him because his dad was Rick Pitino, who was with the Kentucky Wildcats. We already know how I feel about that. Yeah, but see, my thing is this. I think this team is at its best when they have a tandem front court of Race Thompson and Trace Jackson Davis.
Yeah, well, it's hard to argue with that. You know what I mean? Like sometimes Brunk makes them better. There have been games where Brunk's been pretty effective.
How
but
many
there have
Big
been
Ten
games when he hadn't been effective at all.
Was, though?
Oh, maybe 2 or 3. I mean, I get what you're saying, but he is a guy who is going to bring some intensity. He works really hard in practice. I know that's blah blah blah.
Yeah, I really don't care
just
about
noise.
Works hard in practice, to tell you the truth.
Well, I know he likes to reward that. I know Archie does, and so you see different guys periodically. But you know what? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And last night it wasn't broke. So if you keep doing what you did, and Joey starts but plays 8 minutes, and Race comes off the bench and plays 25, I have no problem with that.
But my problem is it was 23-13 in those 8 minutes. Going the other way.
It wasn't good, that's for sure.
And it was 56 to 33 the rest of the time.
And he played some of that sparingly, but some of his minutes came a little bit later in the game. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
Oturu looked like he was going to score 75 points when he was matched up against Joey, and I tweeted about it, and I said, you don't have to be a basketball savant to understand that Oturu is going to be a really, really tough matchup for Indiana. And then they kind of shut him down, and people start yelling at me. Well, what I didn't want to do is call Brunk out and say, look, this matchup with Brunk is a complete disaster. Let's get away from that. But that's what was in my brain. I was just trying to be a little bit more generous with Joey than that.
Yeah, but I don't want to be. So I would also say that Deron Davis, starting with the Michigan performance, his 10 minutes last night against Minnesota, he scored 3 points, but he played really good defense against Oturu.
Who did? I'm sorry?
Deron Davis.
Oh, you know what? When he came onto the floor, and he came out early, right? I mean, he was on the floor before the first TV timeout. He was with about 17 minutes left. He was in the game, and I thought he looked active. I thought he looked obviously going 9-9 from the floor at Michigan. He was really, really good. I thought he was pretty good last night. I didn't dig the 18-foot shot when he can't make foul shots from 15 with no defense. What he's doing taking an 18-footer, I really can't explain. So there's that. But I thought his energy was important. I think the way he can bang into guys and use that big ass to move guys around a little bit, I thought that was a big deal.
Hey, it's like 3 o'clock during the day. There's kids listening, Kent.
All right, big caboose. That make you feel better?
Sure. All right, Penn State's next on Sunday. Penn State, been one of the top 20 teams in the country for a little bit here. They did lose to Illinois, 62-56 at home. They didn't have Myron Jones. That absence for them, I think, was big. But what's your take on Penn State and how Indiana matches up against them right now?
Yeah, that Myron Jones is kind of a big deal. He was sick and had been out for a couple of games. Lamar Stevens is just really, really good. And he's one of those seniors that you've got to account for. Mike Watkins is a senior. They're kind of old. Brockington is a junior. Curtis Jones, a senior. So you've got age on this team and experience. They understand how to defend. They've got a coach who understands how to deploy them on the defensive end. I really like their defense. They're ranked 18th according to KenPom defensively, 31st offensively. But you're going to have to figure out how to take really good care of the basketball because you're not going to get easy buckets against Penn State. So you can't, if you turn it over 10, 12 times, there's going to be a reckoning. And so you've got to play, I think, at a level of execution that we didn't see last night. We've really not seen out of Indiana. They got to tighten stuff up if they're going to compete successfully against Penn State. They got a shot to do it. It'd be a hell of a win. I think if they can beat Penn State, that puts them in a position where they are likely to go to the NCAA tournament instead of kind of, peeking around the corner of the door, almost in, or on the bubble, or one of the last 4 in, ticketed for Dayton. I think that if they could beat Penn State, they got a shot to, be a 10 seed as they make their glorious return to the NCAA tournament if that comes to pass. But they're gonna have to figure out how to attack that defense in a way that where they take really good care of the ball, and that hadn't been their want. They didn't do it the first time against Penn State, and hopefully that defense doesn't travel to Bloomington on Sunday.
Yeah, plus you're going to have a team angry from losing by 6 points at home to Illinois. I think the big question is Myron Jones going to play this game because he's missed the last 4 games.
I don't know what the illness is. Hopefully it's something that takes about another 72 to 74 hours.
Hopefully he'll be good Monday is what you're saying.
Yeah, we're not wishing any long-term damage on Myron Jones, but we sure do hope he doesn't play on Sunday afternoon. It's so odd to consider Penn State as one of the better teams in the Big Ten. It doesn't feel right clicking on them. Right, to see who they are and what they do. You just need to write a W next to them and get on with your day like Indiana's been able to, and everybody else in the Big Ten for the last, 30 years, going back to who's that? Bruce Parkhill, for God's sake.
I remember him.
He was a good coach and a really nice guy. They played their ass off against Indiana, and they didn't have anybody. And Indiana really had to go. It was like 92, and I sent him a letter. I was like, damn, you know what? This is what I used to do. I'd send a card and say, you guys played your asses off. I know Indiana beat you, but holy crap, were you guys good? And he sent me a really nice letter back. So I've always had a soft spot in my heart for that guy, but I have no soft spot in my heart whatsoever for Patrick Chambers, because that game against Illinois, when they were on Fox Sports 1 and everybody was mic'd up, we had all access, right, to these guys. I loved Underhill. I thought he was terrific in the way he communicated with his guys, or Underwood. But Chambers constantly moaning to the officials just wore my ass out. And so I am steeled against the Penn State Nittany Lions, regardless of the opponent, but especially against Indiana.
Okay. So Indiana right now sits at number 10 in the Big Ten. So they're out of that first round game right now. But, of course, they're only one loss from being right back in it. They sit a half a game behind Ohio State, a game behind Michigan, 2 games behind Rutgers. We're at a point here where you got to think about the Big Ten tournament a little bit. You got to think a little bit about the NCAA tournament. I think they need 3 wins to get in, Kent.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, you got to get to 10-10, 20 wins overall. Maybe you win a game in Indy during the Big Ten tournament, and then you're definitively in. But I do think they got to hold serve at home or split the games that they play at Purdue and at Illinois. If you can win 3 of the 5, I think you're in. Winning last night was absolutely huge, because if they didn't, then they'd have to win 4 of 5. And I don't think they're capable of doing that. So this, all things are possible for Indiana right now because of that win last night.
Yeah, I think you've got the game at Penn, or you get the game against Penn State here. You go to Purdue, that should be a win. I keep saying that, but it should be. Because
they just got trucked by the same team at their place.
Oh, I know. What's your point?
Well, I mean,
I'm just saying when I look at the teams,
they're going to get run out the gym at Assembly Hall. I don't see them going up to Mackey and
Yeah, I do. I think they will.
Crowned
kings. I think they're going to beat the hell out of Purdue. I think you're not giving this team enough credit after last night.
I love it. I mean, you know what?
They're still 14-10, Kent.
That's true, and they are on the precipice of. They're in fact not in the NCAA tournament, according to Joe Lunardi. So, there's some matchups that really work well for Indiana against Purdue, and that I thought Indiana was going to be able to beat Purdue down at Assembly Hall. I think Trevion Williams and Deron Davis are very, very similar basketball players, similar builds, and I see that as a positive matchup. You got guys for Purdue that really have trouble scoring the basketball, guys like Nogel Eastern, when he's not on and when he's defended properly. I think that there are a lot of good matchups for Indiana. But again, I mean, if they got so many matchup success stories, why the hell did they get run out of their own gym?
Okay, then why did Michigan State get beat by 30 against Purdue? Do you think that if they played again,
Indiana,
it would be 30?
Like, Indiana beats Michigan State like it's their job.
Oh, yeah, because we own Tom Izzo.
I have no idea why that is. Some of basketball is just mysterious and weird and ethereal and like unpredictable. Like last night, I thought that Uturu was going to be a terrible matchup for Indiana, and it wound up being okay. I mean, what do you have, 11 points and 14 rebounds or something? You can live with that. So who knows what you're going to get out of Indiana on Sunday, and who knows what you're going to get out of Penn State coming off that loss at their place to Illinois.
Well, how about this? I don't think Purdue's going to make the NCAA tournament.
Oh, geez.
No way.
You know what? I'll tell you what it does. If Indiana makes it and Purdue doesn't make it, because I don't believe that Indiana's a better basketball team than Purdue, what people are going to start looking at is the way Indiana's scheduled and the way Purdue's scheduled, and realize that the way Indiana's scheduled is the right way to get that done.
I don't think so. I really don't, because when I look at this, Purdue, and my point to not making a tournament, they're going to be 14-10. They play Michigan at home, but Michigan's playing a lot better, especially if they get
yeah, they
Livers
are.
back. 14-11. They play Indiana, even if they beat Indiana. Then they go to Purdue, and they play Rutgers at home. If they're 15-13, they're not getting in unless they make it to at least the Big Ten semifinals. I don't think, and this goes for Indiana too. I don't think we've seen enough consistent stuff there to put them in. And when you look at Purdue's schedule, you got the win over Chicago State, Jackson State. They did beat Virginia, but at the time that seemed like a huge win. Not so
Yeah.
much now. So there's not like there's a bunch of marquee wins here. They lost to Marquette. Indiana beat Florida State, who was a better team, who I think is probably Florida State's better than Marquette. I think they're ranked higher than them right now. Florida State beat Purdue at Purdue.
In overtime, right?
Yeah, Purdue beat Virginia Commonwealth by 3. They beat
And that
Texas.
was neutral.
Yeah,
The Florida State game.
They beat a Texas. So I don't see where their non-conference schedule was really that great. I know they played Butler in Ohio, but I mean, to me, that's not like the schedule Michigan played. I think you would have that comparison if Michigan was sitting at about the same record as IU, which they may be at the end, and they don't get in. But I just think Michigan's going to get in because Michigan's got wins that, I mean, if they win 18 games, they deserve to be in the tournament. Just the wins they got at the start of the season.
I would not want to play Michigan in the NCAA tournament. I would not want to play them in the Big Ten tournament. I don't want to play them at all. I think that they're a team that's really on the come, and they could present huge problems to anybody in their path, including Purdue. But Purdue really, I mean, they lost to Nebraska at Nebraska. That was a bad loss. Other than that, they really don't have a bad loss. They haven't lost. Texas is 80th, according to Ken
Yeah,
Pom.
but they're not that good if you've watched them.
They have not lost to another team that's outside the top 31.
It's Indiana.
Rutgers is 31st.
Outside, I was thinking 80 when you said that. But, yeah, but you look at Michigan, they've got the win over Creighton. Creighton's a real good basketball team. We both have seen them up close and personal, I think, to say that. North Carolina, which at the time seemed like a big win, not so much now. Iowa State's a decent team, but Michigan beat Gonzaga by 18. They lost to Louisville, but Louisville's a damn good team that could make a run. And I think when you look at the non-conference schedule, Michigan's is what we would want ours to be if we had a better team.
Yeah, but you can either schedule cupcakes in November or you can kind of test your team. And Indiana did not test its team. They banked 7 wins, and those 7 wins are what's keeping them in the conversation as an NCAA tournament team. If instead what they did was play teams that, let's say in those 7, they go 4-3 against those teams. Right now, they are, what would they be? It's 7
They'd be like Purdue.
4. They would be almost exactly Purdue. If not exactly Purdue, they'd be 14-12.
Well, but remember this also. You've also got to win against Florida State, who I think is a top 10 team.
Yeah.
Connecticut, who's making a late run to get into the tournament. What's Louisiana Tech's net ranking?
They weren't too bad. They're 79th right now. But that's what it's going to be. As soon as they got into conference play, it was all going to go, haywire for them. And because they don't play anybody. They haven't played a top 100 team since playing North Texas, and that was on January 18th. So, they're playing teams. Middle Tennessee's 299, Florida Atlantic's 201. They got a lot of teams outside the top 100.
Yeah, but my point is Louisiana Tech is probably going to be a tournament team. I think the last time I saw they were sitting like 18-5 or something, aren't they?
They're 19-7, but they're gonna, like every team in their conference, they got it. If they win the Sun Belt, then they get into the tournament. If they don't, they're on the outside looking in.
But to me, the thing that stands out is the Florida State win. That's a big win. And if Purdue would have beaten Florida State the way Indiana did, they're sitting at 15-9, and that looks a lot more doable then.
they've been, I mean, since that loss to Indiana, they've lost twice, once to Virginia, once to Duke. And you know what? Those are two, I think, NCAA tournament teams. I think Virginia winds up in the tournament. Duke, one of the top 10 teams in the country. So it does hold water as a high-quality win. But that was one of those freak show Devontae Green kind of performances that you're going to get 3-4 times a season. And let me ask you this about Devontae Green. In the aggregate, do you think that they're going to miss him more than they're going to relish him being gone?
I don't think they miss him. I mean, because I think this, from what I see with Race and Trace Jackson Davis and the guys they got coming in, this is going to be a team that's going to be more centered upon getting the ball to the post. And when you got a guy like Devontae Green, a lot of times that kind of gets in the way of that. As we saw last night in the last 5 or 6 minutes when you get to one stupid turnover where the ball doesn't go into Trace before it comes back to him. So
and a contested shot during that period too by Devontae Green early in the shot clock that was just mindless. I would tend to agree, but I think that, in fact, I do wholeheartedly agree. I think basketball's a game best played by 5 guys who try to. It's kind of like, people, actors or improvisers in comedy. If they listen real well, then they're going to be great on stage. And if they don't listen well, if they're constantly thinking about what they're going to say, then they lose track of where they are and nothing works. And I think that Devontae Green, through no fault of his own, it's just the way he's wired as a player, is one of those guys. And I think that once he's gone, it's going to free other guys up to be sort of a more meaningful part of the party and playing greater harmony with the other 4 guys on the floor.
Yeah, and also I would like to bring up the fact that towards the end of December, I asked you if you'd seen San Diego State play yet because I thought they could go undefeated.
Right.
And you mocked me.
Only because I don't watch West Coast basketball. I have an aversion to Bill Walton. So
they don't put him on San Diego State games. That's the Pac-12. And Bill Walton I almost have to watch because you never know when he's going to say something that should get him fired, and he's the only person in the world that could say it and not get fired, but everybody just goes, oh, that's Bill.
And there's a chance that Dave Pasch is going to hit him in the head at some point. Yeah. So there's that.
But no, San Diego State, like I said, you've seen Creighton play, right?
Yeah.
All right. The first time I saw San Diego State, they played Creighton. They beat Creighton 83-52.
Wow.
Nobody does that. And right after that, I watched them because it was some holiday tournament. I watched them play Iowa, and they beat Iowa by double digits.
Wow. Well, I'm going to have to. I'll make it a point to watch as long as it's a Walton free zone.
Yeah,
then I'm
is.
in.
But yeah, I mean, every once in a while in their league, somebody will get close, but the majority of their wins are by double digits. I think it's a team that actually really could make a run at IU's undefeated season.
Well, I sure hope not. I think that'd be terrible.
I know, but if somebody's going to do it, wouldn't it be great that it was San Diego State, not UNLV or Duke?
But look, I mean, they don't play anybody in their conference.
Doesn't matter. If they win the national
Utah
championship,
State's in the top 40.
Hey, but the thing is this, if they win the national championship, they beat somebody in almost every conference to get there.
Yeah, I guess. I hope they don't have a clear path. I hope they've got to beat real teams once they get to the tournament. UNLV's outside the top 100, Air Force, New Mexico, and that's going to weigh in their favor too because they haven't gotten the crap kicked out of them by playing in the Big East or the Big Ten where you got to show up every night with your A game or you're going to get run out of the gym.
Yeah, but now the thing they do is they have to beat boredom, which a lot of times can be worse than that.
Yeah, but once you get to March, you're not going to be bored. And you're not going to be nursing the bumps
I'm just saying
bruises.
Getting to be undefeated at that point because what was the last team to make that run? Wichita State, and then they screwed them and made Kentucky like the number 8 seed, and they lost in overtime by a point.
Wasn't that sweet?
You know,
Wichita State, I
hope they lose forever. It was not sweet. Why was that sweet? Kentucky won. Didn't you hear me?
Yeah, I know. I hate Kentucky, but I'm not a big Greg Marshall guy, so
I don't
I'm
care.
not
He's not Kentucky.
Well,
Literally, Kent,
maybe.
if the
Hey,
Devil coached a college basketball team and they played Kentucky, I would cheer for the Devil.
how about last night when you had Tennessee playing, or Auburn playing Georgia with Teddy Valentine as an official? So you had Crean going against Pearl with Teddy V as a ref. That game was must unsee TV. Who the hell wants to watch those three guys do what they do?
You know what
So
that
much
tells
fun
me?
to be able to avoid them all at once.
It tells me that you have a secret crush on Tom Crean because you even knew that he played last night. And
I watched for a little bit.
know who the official was, so that tells me you watched the game.
Hey, if you watch more than 40 seconds of a game that Ted Valentine's officiating, you're going to see all kinds of Ted Valentine. That's a Ted Valentine show. So,
Got to be in the Big East then, huh?
well, God, it's still, I go back to, what was that, 91 or 92, right? When he called that foul on Chaney and put Chaney on the bench with an offensive foul, and that was his third of the first half. That totally changed the game against Duke. I think that Indiana wins a national championship if not for Ted Valentine that year.
Oh, no doubt, because we know Michigan wasn't beating Bob Knight in a national championship game.
No.
No way.
No.
Ever.
So, and if Leitner hadn't hit that shot, because Indiana matched up really well with Kentucky. And I think Indiana would run
I
Kentucky
can honestly
out.
tell you this. That was still a great moment, too, because Kentucky lost. And to me, it's a bigger deal that Kentucky loses than my team wins, because I just want to make sure that those hillbillies that live down in Kentucky, that they don't have any happiness at all.
You better be careful. The hashtag BBN people are going to come after your ass.
They can come after my ass. That's fine. Because I'm a Hoosier. They're from Kentucky. I don't care because
they got furious. I don't know what I tweeted, but they were like, "I'm coming." I'm going to
tell
put
them
a
to come
bullet in your
on because
eye.
you know what?
Like,
they'd have to walk because none of them have driver's license.
And they could pay a visit while they're here to Dr. Mike O'Neill at Today's Dentistry. So
yeah, but they can't because a dentist specializes in working on teeth, Kent. You can't work on something that's not there. So
that's
your
quite
doctor,
true.
would have to just be a gum doctor.
That would have been. I love it when Indiana eliminates Kentucky from the NCAA tournament. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's what a reason to celebrate and a reason for joy.
Has Indiana ever eliminated Kentucky from the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, 2016.
Oh, that wasn't even that long ago.
No.
I don't even remember that. I remember all the other games, like 80 or 75, when Scott May,
right.
Had to play with. And I still think that, that was the one time Bobby Knight screwed up. They played at the Wildcats' pace.
They had chances in 82 and 83. They were both in the same sub-regional. But
we played
Indiana...
them in 83 in the Sweet 16 because they beat us 64-56, I think, in Louisville, because that was the game before Kentucky and Louisville played the double overtime game in the Elite Eight.
Did we play them? No, we got beat. Didn't we get beat by Louisville?
No.
We got beat the one year by Kentucky got beat by Middle Tennessee State.
We got beat by UAB.
And that we got beat by UAB.
That was in 82, yeah.
And I was there. And then the next year we were there, but we sold our tickets because we were having a great time in Knoxville.
Yeah, it was Knoxville, and we lost. I guarantee it. We lost to Kentucky, 63-56, I think.
Is that right?
Yeah, because
I know Louisville.
Kentucky and Louisville played that Elite Eight game right after that, which was the biggest game in the history of the Gum State.
And we sold our tickets. How about that? What idiots. We sold them for $60 to that game. I thought we were going to make out like fools, and not so much. Actually, we did. We made out like fools. So,
but you were still smarter than the Kentucky fans that were there.
Yeah, well, the $60 spent very, very nicely at the hotel bar at the Hyatt Regency in Knoxville. That was quite a show. We did Indiana proud, baby, in that game.
Is that in your book?
Holy
Oops.
cow! Not that one. No, there's some things I'm not sure what the statute of limitations are on some of those indiscretions. But you're right. Beat them 64-59.
Oh, I was
Kentucky
close on
did
the score,
beat
too.
Indiana,
That wasn't bad.
and then Louisville by 12 in
Yeah,
overtime.
double overtime, I think it was. Wasn't it 80-68?
It was, yeah, it was 80-68,
And
and
then that's when they lost
man,
to Phi Slamma Jamma in the Final Four, and everybody thought that was a national championship game.
you're right. And they, man, was Houston. I didn't think anybody was going to beat them. I thought that people were right. But that Joe B. Hall, we talked about him last time. But my God, Derek Horde, Dirk Minifield, Charles Hurt, Dickie Beal, those guys, they came into Kentucky so highly touted, and they left Kentucky as very, very ordinary dudes.
Well, that's what everybody does.
That's what you want. That was your whammy.
Oh, yeah.
That was
I love Joe B. Hall.
That was the Mike Goodpaster whammy.
Joe B. Hall kept him from winning national championship. My favorite was still 1984 when I got my buddies that went to school with me. I had two that were Kentucky fans that are blowing my phone up because they're beating Georgetown in that first 15 minutes. And then the rest of the game, I think Kentucky scored like 4 points in the second half. I think it ended up like 55-40 or 53-40. And I remember Michael Graham would just, block their shot and then flex on him and look mean. Because he really looked like somebody that just got out of the state pen to play in that game.
Those were wonderful college basketball seasons. I fell in love with college basketball from 1981 to about 1986.
The thing that got me sold on it for sure would have been 1977 Marquette. Of course, the 76 years, but college basketball overall. 77 Marquette with Val McGuire, and then, of course, 79 Indiana State and Larry Bird.
Well, and you had everything in that Final Four, Penn coming into the Final Four that year, and the drama with Bird and Magic, and, I was in high school, but, man, that was really compelling in New Albany because of Bird being a Southern Indiana guy. But those were, and you had, I was going round and round with John Feinstein about Billy Packer. He wants Billy Packer in the Hall of Fame. And I said, if you're going to put Billy Packer in, you should induct Al McGuire twice.
And Dick Enberg, the three of them together need to go.
They were wonderful. And Packer had no sense of humor at all, and all Al McGuire had was a sense of humor. And so it was fun to hear them go back and forth, and it was great theater, and the broadcasts were hilarious and fun because Packer was that straight man. I think Packer without McGuire, I really had no time for it. It wasn't compelling to me. But, man, McGuire and Enberg is the orchestrator of those broadcasts. When the NCAA tournament went to CBS, I mean, that was just crushing to me because it meant no more Al and Enberg and Packer doing those games, and that's what made it work for me.
Well, and the thing I remember about 1979 is Sidney Moncrief, because if you remember the Elite Eight regional final game they played at Riverfront Coliseum in Cincinnati, I think Indiana State was down a point with like 30 seconds left. They called a timeout, and they tried to get the ball to Larry Bird. And Sidney Moncrief denied Larry Bird the ball for like 27 seconds. And then ended up, was it Rob Heaton had to take the shot? It hits up off the back of the rim, goes straight up in the air, and comes down in. And if that ball doesn't go in, maybe it's Sidney Moncrief against Magic Johnson. And then you had the semifinal where I think Indiana State beats DePaul 75-74, and Bird and Aguirre both go off. Those were two great games that could have went either way. And I just remembered Sidney Moncrief because I don't think in the NBA after that I ever saw anybody that could defend Larry Bird good enough to deny him the ball with the game on the line with less than 30 seconds left.
And I'll bet that still sticks with Larry Bird, that moment. And I'm sure that fueled an off season of work and he says, we talked to him about this not too long ago, that he still dreams that he plays. His dreams are all him playing basketball. in his dreams, he's still playing. And I don't know whether that's great or sad or what it is, but man, that dude, what an unbelievable. There's a great story in the Larry Bird book by Bob Ryan, where Bob Costas is going to do a Celtics game at the old Boston Garden, and it's about 4 hours before game time, and the lights are off in the Garden. The court isn't even lit, but Costas can hear a ball dribbling and then not dribbling and hear it come off the rim periodically. And he walks down to the court, and it's Larry Bird shooting in the dark. That's just who he was. And he was fueled by his ability to compete and his desire to win. And, I think that that's so compelling. And that's the thing that we watch for. And the thing that's so disappointing when a team, Indiana or anybody else, doesn't understand the possibilities of the special exploits that they can author if they just understand that themselves in that moment and their ability to compete at a high level and test themselves instead of just kind of show up and go through the motions.
Yeah, and the great thing about Larry Bird was he was never satisfied with anything.
Right.
And there's very few guys like that, especially nowadays.
David Benner had a nice tweet the other day. He talking about the All-Star game coming to Indianapolis next year. He said it'd be fun to have kind of an old guys 3-point shooting contest with guys like Ray Allen and Reggie Miller. And he said, don't even ask about Larry Bird unless there's a cash prize. But if there's a cash prize, everybody else is playing for second.
Yeah, because he'd still beat them all.
He would.
Especially
he would. That's when the All-Star game and the All-Star Fufara on Saturday was fun.
Well,
when
yeah,
you had
it was
Larry
Bird,
Bird in the 3-point shooting contest.
Usually Bird against Dale Ellis, who would make an amazing amount too, and it didn't matter. And then you had a dunk contest with Michael Jordan and Dominique Wilkins. I'm sorry, but that was the good stuff. I mean, that's when the NBA was really taking off. It was Bird against Magic. It was All-Star Weekend where, you'd have a 5'5" Spud Webb come in and win the dunk contest. He didn't, but they gave it to him. And then you had Dominique Wilkins against Michael Jordan. And Wilkins smoked Jordan in 1988 in Chicago. I don't care what anybody says.
Oh, stop that. That's crazy
true.
Talk.
It's not crazy
I
talk.
do not. Jordan was
Everybody
unbelievable.
knows that.
Jordan took off from the
Jordan
free throw
admitted
line
the other day
in his
that he
house.
shouldn't have won.
Oh, he's just being gracious.
No, Michael
That's
Jordan
Michael's
has
way.
never been gracious. Nobody has. You never see Michael Jordan at the events either because nobody likes him, Ken.
That's the truth.
I know. That's why you don't see Isaiah Thomas either.
That's the price of winning championships.
Not really. Because
if you want to be popular, you can go ahead and do that on your own time.
Magic
You're
Johnson's
not going to do
popular.
it and win championships.
Magic's popular. Bill Russell was popular.
Yeah, I think it depends on. Well, he's popular now.
Well,
I don't know how popular he was internally in the league.
From the early '90s on, I think Bill Russell was popular.
Yeah, but playing, if you're going to play at a championship level and you're going to play to win and to hell with everything else, you're not going to make a lot of friends. And so Michael didn't. Neither did Bill Laimbeer. Bill Laimbeer is still hated. Larry Bird hates
I love Bill Laimbeer.
Bill Laimbeer today.
I always
my
liked
God.
Bill Laimbeer.
He's the most loathsome. God, if
that's
you
because you're a
Detroit,
Bulls fan.
You hated
See,
him.
You know what? I hate Michael Jordan. There, I said it because I like the Pistons.
Laimbeer was just awful. He's the most.
But he was a great
I'll
player.
tell you, I've met all kinds of famous people, and Bill Laimbeer I had to go get him at the Conrad Hotel in Indianapolis when he was coaching the Detroit Shock, right, in the WNBA. And so Laimbeer agreed to come up in studio and talk to Kravitz and Eddie, who were working at 1070 The Fan then. And I had to go get him in the lobby of the hotel and walk him to the station. And he gave off a vibe that was so unmistakably hostile. It was like I knew you walked up to him and you're like, okay, this guy wants no small talk whatsoever. He wants no interaction. Just tell him you're going to the studio, walk him to the building, get in the elevator, dump him in the studio, and be done with his ass. Because that guy was, and I'm sure he worked at it. He was repellent.
I still think this is because you're a Bulls fan, and I think he probably sensed it. You're lucky he didn't smack you upside the head. But
and
Bill
then he
Laimbeer
came
could
on
play,
and
though.
he talked about Bird and how much he hated Bird. And then we were talking to Bird at some other point, and like you bring up Bill Laimbeer, it gets frosty. Like those guys still have they hate each other to this day, and they're both in their 60s.
But that's why the games were so legitimately great.
Yes.
Because there's nothing I hate more than watching guys, play each other, talk a bunch of smack to each other, and then the game's over, and they high-five each other, and they hug it out and talk for 5 minutes. I want to see guys get violent.
Yeah, there was no dapping back in the 80s and the 90s. None of that crap happened.
Just Magic and Isaiah kissing until, Isaiah started to win, and then Magic didn't want to kiss him no more.
That's right.
I think what that was is Isaiah.
Story.
Didn't Isaiah hit him with a forearm in a finals game or something, and that pretty much stopped the kissing?
Hey, Isaiah Thomas was coming to take your lunch money. That guy, you talk about a guy who is not in it to make friends. That's Isaiah Thomas, too. There are a lot of guys. And I think that happens with generations, right? Where you need to have an attitude to be able to win. You can't just be physically dominant. You got to come at it with an attitude and a psychology that's going to allow you to compete with these guys because they're not in it for the dapping and, to go to the club after the game. That's not what these guys were about.
Yeah, and let's face it. Magic Johnson was Showtime, so he smiled while calling you an asshole.
Right. There wasn't anybody who wanted to win more than him. And you're right. There's a smiley magic, and there's an entirely different magic underneath that smile.
Yeah. All right.
There has to be.
And the Bulls still suck, and I don't like Michael Jordan. And
they sure as hell suck now.
They would have never beaten the 86 Celtics or the 87 Lakers.
The 86 Celtics, that would have been really interesting.
The 87
that would
Lakers
have been a fun series.
Too. That 87 Lakers team, come on. You got to be kidding me. Who's guarding James
Worthy? There were still
Worthy?
Lots of guys from there in the 91 team that the Bulls beat
No, there
5.
wasn't. Dude, come on. There was no
Magic
Kareem
was still there.
Abdul-Jabbar. There was a Magic and Vlade Divac. Come on. Jeez.
Kareem,
James Worthy was old.
How old was Kareem in 87? What was Kareem, 42 years old?
Hey, if you remember this about Kareem, though, in 1985, when he was 40, they got beat 148-114 in Game 1 at the Boston Garden. Game 2, I remember Brent Musburger coming on and saying, well, Kareem doesn't know if he's going to play. He's got a migraine. But they're down 1-0. They'd lost in 7 the year before. He came out, played Game 2, scored, I think, 32 points in Game 2. And basically won them the game to tie the series. And then he played 3 games with migraines and averaged like 26 points and 14 rebounds, and he was 40 years old. So Kareem was
Michael Jordan with a fever of 112 in Utah.
Against Utah, a 2-man team, and one of them, Karl Malone, who was a good free throw shooter, choked all over himself in both of those series shooting free throws.
That's the magic of Michael.
No,
Michael put the whammy on him, and bada bing, bada boom, they win that series.
Well, all I know is if Magic and Larry don't get old, the Bulls never win anything.
Well, if Bill Russell and Bob Cousy and Tommy Heinsohn didn't get old, nobody would have won nothing.
Yeah, they would have, because those teams could not have dealt. Those teams really couldn't have dealt with the Knicks of 70 and 73. They couldn't have. If you match them up, Walt Clyde Frazier would have, taken Bob Cousy's lunch money.
Oh, boy. I don't dispute that. I never saw Bob Cousy play. So I've
just seen the film,
tapes.
And I don't know if he has a left hand.
Right.
I mean, he's
Interesting
spinning in
guy.
circles. Right-handed ball. At the time, greatest team that ever lived. But that's also a league that had like 6 to 8 teams in it.
Right.
They got to keep the same guys all the time, and their only competition was the Lakers.
Michael and the Bulls, if Michael doesn't go play baseball, they win 8 straight.
He had to go play baseball, or he would have been suspended or he would have been suspended anyways from the NBA.
That's nonsense.
It's
that's
not nonsense.
It is too.
I've got pretty good sources that tell me that it's not nonsense.
Well, Of course he gambled. Of course he was spending time in casinos. I don't buy any of that.
It wasn't just casinos, but you
No.
ought to do some research. I'm not going to say anything because you're a Bulls fan, which means you only see things through Bulls-colored glasses. But since you're a Bulls fan, name me the Bulls starting five today.
Today?
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
Exactly. Good Lord does not
to my
play
credit,
on the team.
I cannot. Sheesh. I don't think Denzel Valentine starts. You got Markkanen.
Don't be looking it up, Ken.
No, I'm not looking
okay.
it. I'm pacing in the kitchen. Who's the other? God, I can't even remember the dude's name. The guy.
So were you a Bulls fan or were you a Michael Jordan fan?
I was a Bulls fan when I lived in Chicago. Living here for 25 years, you're going to figure some things out. I like the Pacers, and the Bulls are terrible. So, yeah, I've moved on from the Bulls, the Bears. Never was a White Sox fan. And I'll watch the Blackhawks on occasion. Still a Cubs fan, though.
See, I've been a Pacers fan since the days of Billy Knight.
Really?
Yeah. I remember the first time they ever won a playoff game in the NBA. Game 3, I think it was, 1987 at Market Square Arena. They beat the Atlanta Hawks.
Well, there you go.
Because I remember down here, there weren't that many NBA games on TV, but Channel 4, WTTV, used to show all the games. But I'm living an hour and a half, 2 hours away from there, and my dad had a huge antenna. If I moved it just right, I could watch the game, and it looked like a snow game from Buffalo's Rich Stadium.
Wasn't that the best, though?
Not really, because I really couldn't see the game, Ken.
I loved it. Like getting the rabbit ears and trying to tweak it in just the right way. When we lived in Western Michigan and everything was right, you could get WGN from Chicago. And like we had a big, giant, tall antenna, and you'd work this electrical dealie to turn it around. And maybe every 20 games, the Cubs would come in clear as a bell for about 15 minutes. And it was just like a magic tether.
It was like you struck gold.
Right. And we don't, I mean, not that I'd want to go back to that. I'm not looking to, erect an antenna on the roof. But those, or with the radio, like you get the radio and it's just right. And you can listen to stuff from way far away. Now you can listen to anything you want, anytime you want. And it's just, there's not that magic to it that old guys can't stop waxing rhapsodic about.
Yeah, because I remember listening to the Big East tournament from, what was the big station in New York, The Fan or something?
Well, that started in, what was that, 89?
Now, what was the big radio station in New York? There was a station in New York that I could get, once it got dark, I could get it.
Yeah.
I remember listening to St. John's play Georgetown. Patrick Ewing against Chris Mullin, which, I mean, they're probably the two worst basketball coaches I've ever seen. But they were really good basketball players, and those games were always really good. Heck, I remember listening to the 1979 Stanley Cup Finals. I became a New York Ranger fan that way. So
isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I remember listening to a Reds Cubs game. Like I wouldn't listen on WLW, so I was trying to get WGN, and it was the late '70s, and it was right before cable, and it was just when you got it in, and you're dialing it in, and you're in bed, and you're trying to sneak, and your parents are like, "What are you doing in there?" And that was just, to me, that was cool.
All right, Kent. I guess we're going to have to wrap it up. I just realized we're at an hour, and I thought we were just on a phone conversation reminiscing about our youth. So do you want to go Sunday after Indiana destroys the heavily ranked, heavily favored Penn State Nittany Lions?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. You want to tell everybody where they can find your book, Oops, and where they can find you on the internet?
You can find me on the internet at KentSterling.com. We try to make it easy, and at Kent Sterling on Twitter. The book, Oops, The Art of Learning from Mistakes and Adventures, available on Amazon. Just search Oops and Kent. A lot of books named Oops, so you got to put Kent in there, and it's 244 pages of me telling stories about myself that, to me, they're not terribly funny, but to other people who read it, sometimes they find them amusing, and the lessons I learned from those stories, that's kind of the crux to the book.
All right, guys, and you can follow me at Grueling Truth. If you like boxing, our Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder preview show is up. We'll have an XFL show live tonight at 10 o'clock. Yeah, we got an XFL show, Kent. And
nice.
Then after Wilder Fury, we will be live after the fight Saturday night. That'll probably be somewhere between midnight and 1 if you want to listen in there with myself, John Einreinhofer, New York Times bestselling author John Raspani, and someday I'm going to introduce Kent Sterling as a New York Times bestselling author.
Well, I look forward to that day, and I also look forward to Wilder absolutely destroying Fury, and I think that the end is nigh for Fury.
Yeah, Fury will knock him out somewhere between the 7th and 10th round.
Oh, come on, really?
Yeah.
Wilder's going to kill him, and it isn't going to go 7, unless Fury's just like sandbagging and saying nonsense in the media. He's going to come out and try to destroy him in the first 2.
If he comes out and tries to destroy him, he will, because Deontay Wilder has poor feet, and if he's forced to move backwards with the guy getting in his chest, I don't think he can punch off his back foot. I don't think Fury will do that. I think they will stare at each other for about 8 or 9 rounds, and then Deontay will get desperate. Fury will catch him. They both suck, so it doesn't really matter. I grew up watching Muhammad Ali and Larry Holmes, so these guys do not impress me. I'm pretty sure if you give me 6 weeks to get in shape, I'd probably take them both. So if they're listening out there and you've got an extra $20 million you want to throw at me, I will fight you on pay-per-view on Cinco de Mayo.
Can you catch a chicken?
Yes. Actually, I've got some in the fridge right now, so it would be no problem for me to go in and catch the chicken.
All right, man. We'll talk to you Sunday.
All right, guys. For Kent Sterling, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak. I got a message